Lisa Maria Kaiser was born in 1994 in a large family where her 8 siblings also grew up. It was a large but far from prosperous family. Parents were busy with their own problems and did not show love and care towards their children. Moreover, there were rumors that abuse and violence were rampant in the family. The story in question unfolded in the year 2020, at the very time when the whole world was consumed with the fight against COVID-19. In one corner of Ecuador, quietly and unnoticed, truly terrible events were unfolding. Here, in the small parish of Pifo, on the northeastern outskirts of Quito, the protagonist of this tragic story was born and raised, Lisa Maria Kaiser, a woman with an enigmatic gaze whose life story became a true Ecuadorian nightmare. On that unfortunate Tuesday, October 27, 2020, Lisa sent several messages to the father of her children, David. They were words full of despair, because their paths with David at that time had already almost parted. In these lines, she confessed her love for him and her unexpected new pregnancy. However, in subsequent messages, Lisa wrote that life was losing its meaning for her, and the decision to terminate the pregnancy was inevitable. Throughout the night, Lisa pleaded with David to come to her, but his refusal was resolute. His parents also urged him to stay home, and David took their advice. In the early morning hours of October 28th, neighbors in Lisa's home heard a faint cry for help. Looking out the window, they found a woman lying on the floor with signs of vomiting. The neighbors rushed to help her, immediately calling emergency services. The doctors and police arrived and found Lisa in a critical condition, but still alive. After administering first aid, she was immediately hospitalized. However, in the house, her children, a girl of 5 and a boy of 9, were found unconscious. The doctors were unable to help them. Their little hearts had stopped beating at that point. Authorities learned the identity of the children's father and contacted David Acosta, who, upon learning of the tragedy, immediately arrived on the scene accompanied by his father. He was informed that Lisa was in the hospital, and his children were found without signs of life. After several days of fighting for life in the hospital, Lisa finally regained consciousness. By that time, the investigators, guided by their findings, had presented the prosecutor's office with sufficiently convincing arguments to issue an arrest warrant for this mysterious woman. When she was released from the hospital, she was immediately transferred to a social rehabilitation center. The authorities insisted that Lisa undergo a psychological and psychiatric evaluation as her state of mind required further investigation as part of the upcoming trial. Lisa ended up in a rehabilitation center and doctors and psychologists took up their work. In a conversation with a criminal psychologist, Lisa opened up about her difficult childhood where her parents fought and abused each other and their children. Her childhood had a noticeable impact on her state of mind, and moments of quarrels and her parents' divorce became an integral part of her memories. Such a childhood forced Lisa to go to work from the age of 11 to be able to study. The girl strived to escape from her dysfunctional family and build her future in a different way. The expert report also indicated that Lisa had been abused. She talked about how, after several years of marriage, David, her husband, changed dramatically. He began to humiliate his spouse and then to raise his hand against her. On the day of the tragedy with the children, investigators working at the scene found several glasses with liquid residue on the table. These finds later revealed traces of epilepsy pills belonging to one of the children, as well as other chemicals requiring identification. Police officers thoroughly searched the house, and after noticing a strange odor in the kitchen, noticed a suspicious area under the utility room. They broke down the barrier and found a lifeless body wrapped in a blanket with characteristic signs of having been there for a long time. Later, further investigation revealed that the discovered body belonged to Jamie Yanchiguano, a 28-year-old who had been in contact with Lisa. Jamie had been reported missing by his family days before the gruesome discovery. According to Rosa Yanchiguano, Jamie's sister, he was last seen on October 18th. Rosa told investigators that after her brother disappeared, Lisa called several times inquiring about him. Lisa claimed to have received a text message from Jamie, where he mentioned that illegal substance traffickers were holding him captive and demanding a ransom of $8,000. She strongly warned Jamie's family not to contact the police. This claim became a crucial point in a complex investigation, as detectives sought to solve the tragedy and uncover if there were any other hidden victims. During her interrogation, Lisa revealed that in 2020, while working at a cookie factory, she met Jamie Ian Chiguano. According to her, they became friends. Lisa wanted to return to her husband, who allegedly planned to blackmail Jamie for money. David made it clear to Lisa that if she did not help him, he would divorce her. Later, David gave Lisa a white powder and told her to put it in Jamie's food. Once she did, Jamie fell asleep and never woke up. Realizing what had happened, Lisa, in desperation, tried to win back her husband, but failed. In her despair, she ingested the same poison and gave it to her children. However, the poison did not have the expected effect on her, and she sought help from her neighbors to save herself from the horror that had befallen her children. Following her testimony, investigators launched a thorough investigation, but no evidence of David's involvement was found. No one close to the couple could have foreseen that Lisa Maria and David Acosta's lives would take such a tragic turn. When they met, Lisa was only 16 years old and still in high school, a dreamy and romantic girl, while David was a strong and determined young man. Their friendship quickly developed into strong feelings, leading to Lisa's unexpected pregnancy. Although their families disapproved of their relationship, David's parents supported their son and welcomed Lisa into their home. In difficult times, David's family provided genuine support to the young couple, even inviting Lisa to live with them to ensure she completed high school. When Lisa turned 18, the couple got married. 2 years later, they were expecting their second child, a daughter. David's parents decided to provide the young couple with their own home, giving them an apartment where they found a corner of family happiness. However, over time, their relationship began to deteriorate. Both spouses were unfaithful, leading to mistrust and disappointment. Their once boundless love began to weaken. Lisa also complained of psychological abuse from David, prompting her to seek help from the police. Eventually, she was granted a protective order, forcing David to leave the family home. At this point, Lisa began to blackmail David, demanding money for the chance to see their children. In early September 2020, Lisa's life took an unexpected turn when her eldest son began suffering from seizures. In desperation, she took him to the emergency room at Baca Ortiz Hospital. After stabilizing his condition, doctors conducted tests and diagnosed a focal form of epilepsy, a severe condition affecting a specific part of the brain. Doctors advised Lisa to undergo further tests, including MRIs, and to consult specialists urgently. However, Lisa ignored these recommendations. A month later, her son suffered another seizure, and they returned to the emergency room. Reviewing his medical history, doctors discovered Lisa had not followed their earlier advice, failed to complete tests, and had not seen specialists, leaving her son without necessary treatment. They warned her that continued neglect could lead to legal consequences. Despite the warnings, Lisa disregarded the medical advice. A few weeks later, after her son's condition resurfaced, she called David, who was alarmed by her serious tone. She informed him that a social worker would visit to discuss. To brighten the waiting time, Lisa offered him a drink. However, as David drank the drink, he suddenly felt unwell. His condition was worsening, and the social worker had not shown up. So David decided to go home to get something to deal with his discomfort. The next morning, David woke up in a terrible state. He could barely speak because his tongue was numb. Every step caused discomfort, and his eyes hurt. His parents insisted on calling an ambulance. David was taken to the hospital where he spent several days. Tests revealed the presence of a psychoactive substance in his system. But given that he hadn't used anything of the sort, David began to speculate how this could have happened. Eventually, he speculated that perhaps someone had deliberately slipped him some substance in a public place. David was grateful for his life and realized that what had happened could have ended much worse. In early October 2020, Lisa made the decision to hire a nanny for her children. Her cousin Patricia recommended her friend Bertha, a responsible 48-year-old woman looking for work. On Monday, October 5th, Bertha arrived at the young mother's house. Lisa urged her to take a pill that she said helped prevent infection with the COVID-19 virus, an epidemic of which was at its height at the time. Claiming that it was a highly effective natural remedy, Lisa convinced Bertha to swallow the medicine and enter the house. They sat down to discuss the babysitter's childcare duties. A few minutes later, Bertha began to feel sick. She felt a headache. Her stomach began to upset, and eventually she vomited. A short while later, Patricia showed up. It turned out that she had called her cousin repeatedly, but Lisa didn't answer, which alerted Patricia. She decided to check what had happened and immediately went to her house. Upon entering, she found Bertha lying on the couch, who was practically fainting already. Lisa shared with her cousin what had happened and expressed concern. Learning that Lisa still had not called an ambulance, Patricia immediately did so herself. After a while, doctors arrived and sent Bertha to the hospital. The condition of the victim managed to stabilize. Doctors diagnosed poisoning with a toxic substance, which often happens when using various medications. Doctors decided that Bertha did not tolerate some component of the composition of the pills from COVID-19. A few months before this tragic incident, in June of the same year, Lisa's former buddy, Mark Escanto, had died of poisoning. At the time, the cause of his death had gone unnoticed. But now, given all these strange circumstances, Mark's case required additional attention. Investigators scrutinized the deceased's home and found Lisa's fingerprints on the glasses used the night before Mark's death. This fact added new evidence to the investigation, pointing to Lisa's possible involvement in the incident. But suddenly, a new accusation was made against Lisa. Her own family made a shocking report to the police. It turns out that on September 2nd, the family had a family gathering where Lisa offered to let everyone taste a drink of her own making. 7 brothers and sisters of the young woman, as well as their parents, drank the unknown drink and immediately felt sick. Fortunately, no one died, but the 56-year-old mother suffered a stroke. Lisa's father claimed that while the relatives were seeking medical attention, his daughter stole $1,300 from the house. Now the investigation included not only crimes against the children and a former boyfriend, but also an incident that jeopardized the lives and health of her own family members. As it turned out, that wasn't all. Investigators encountered another strange event. In May of that year, Jose Luis Arrezo, a friend of Lisa's, was found dead in his home. A few days before, Jose had suddenly disappeared, and neighbors soon smelled a rotting odor, prompting them to contact the authorities. An examination of the body initially revealed nothing suspicious, and was ruled a heart attack. But one of Jose's sisters suspected something strange and hid a bottle of alcohol found in the refrigerator. In addition, Jose's family noticed that some items were missing from the house. Turned out that Lisa and Jose were friends, and when the guy died, the alleged killer contacted his relatives by phone. With a distraught voice, she stated that Jose owed her a large sum of money, and she had to contact the family to repay the debt. This cunning plan did not work, and a little later, Lisa called Jose's family again, changing her voice to conceal her identity. Identifying herself as Jose's friend, she claimed that she was pregnant by him and now had to apply for child support. Although Jose's family did not believe these stories, Lisa was not about to give up and made a third attempt to deceive them. She said she knew who was responsible for Jose's death and offered to meet to uncover the details. Had she not been arrested on charges of killing her own children and Jamie, the list of victims might have gotten longer. When the media reported the arrest of Lisa, who had poisoned 3 people, Jose's relatives understood. They immediately reported their suspicions to the authorities, and Jose's body was exhumed for forensic examination to determine the true cause of death. The relatives were not mistaken. Traces of poison were found in the remains of the deceased. On December 22, 2020, a hearing was held for Lisa Maria Kaiser for the murder of her 2 children, whose names and photos were classified, and for Jamie Ianchiguano. The trial was conducted virtually due to restrictions related to the spread of the COVID-19 virus. Lisa had been in contact from a social rehabilitation center. The prosecutor's statement said that Lisa gave her children a toxic mixture of insecticides and anti-epileptic drugs. In interrogations, She claimed that she had grown desperate and could not leave her children with her husband David, who did not care for the children. In fact, she admitted that she wished them dead. At the end of the hearing, the judge issued the defendant a court pass and ordered her remanded into custody pending trial. The children's trial next took place in 2021 at the Pichincha Provincial Court. The prosecutor presented a set of evidence to prove Lissa's guilt. Among them were statements by David, who revealed the content of messages the wife had received on the eve of the tragedy. In one of the messages, she claimed that she would take with her what belonged to her, referring to the children. She said she didn't know where her children and herself would go, heaven or hell. But now she felt as if she was in hell. Lissa added that she doesn't expect her husband to forgive her because she knows he hated her, and now he will hate her even more. David also spoke about his unstable relationship with his wife. At the hearing, the defendant's reconstructed testimony was presented, stating that she took 2 pills that day, called for help, and then passed out. According to the reconstruction conducted by the prosecutor's office, the daughter died while still in bed, and her older brother tried to take a few steps to call for help, but fell and died. The conclusion of the forensic medical examination was extremely clear. The children died as a result of a premeditated crime. The deaths were the result of suffocation caused by pulmonary edema and intoxication caused by a mixture of epilepsy medication and other unspecified substances, presumably insecticides and disinfectant. The prosecution also charged Lissa with the death of Jamie Ianchiguano, whose body was found bricked up in the kitchen. The perpetrator was also suspected of attempting to kill David and members of her own family. The hearing raised the issue of Lissa's irresponsible attitude to her son's health after being diagnosed with localized epilepsy. The mother ignored instructions for further tests and follow-up examinations. And when the boy was hospitalized again, his condition was exacerbated by her own mother's negligence. Warnings from medical professionals did not change her attitude toward her son's treatment, leading to a threatened termination of her parental rights. Lissa's mental health investigations revealed her to be highly emotional and environmentally dependent. She sought constant attention and understanding from others and experienced severe anxiety when events did not unfold according to her plan. She also exhibited a tendency to self-harm. She attempted to say goodbye to her life at least 3 times, but was unsuccessful each time. Witnesses described her as insecure, attachment-seeking, exhibiting schizoid and erratic behavior. The findings of the psychological analysis also emphasized that on the day of the tragic events, Lissa acted with full awareness of her actions. After a long trial that lasted 10 months, Lissa Maria Kaisa was found guilty of the crime against her children. The Pichincha Provincial Court sentenced her to 34 years and 8 months imprisonment. In addition to this, she was ordered to pay David a compensation of more than $20,000. It was noted in the press that Lissa remained calm throughout the proceedings and only showed emotion when her children were mentioned. The Jamie Ianchiguano murder case, which began in August 2021, appeared to be unfinished. New details were revealed during the court hearings. Lissa admitted giving her friend a white substance mixed with alcohol but claimed she got it from David. However, the investigation proved otherwise. According to a psychiatrist who interviewed Lissa, she did not want to take Jamie's life. She wanted to intimidate his family so she could then extort money. She did demand $8,000 as ransom. Experts called the plan disorganized, which ultimately led to the crime. In addition, forensic tests revealed that it wasn't that simple. Jamie was found to have poison in his system, and the cause of death was strangulation. The body was found with a shattered rib cage and wire around the neck. Lissa claimed that after her friend died, she decided to bury him under a back room and cement him in. The store owner's testimony confirmed that Lissa bought building materials during the days of Haim's disappearance. After the parties' arguments, the prosecutor's office requested a new trial in April 2022. At that trial, an additional charge of extortion was filed. Lissa called Jamie's relatives, claiming he was being held by a group of gangsters and demanded $8,000 for his release. The defense relied on the lack of conclusive evidence that Lissa was involved in Jamie's murder. Nevertheless, she was found guilty and received a 22-year prison sentence, as well as a sentence to pay $5,000 to the victim's mother. While Jamie's trial was underway, the investigation of Mark Escanto and Jose Luis Arrezo, Lisa's alleged victims, was nearing completion. Mark Escanto was 48 years old, and tests conducted after his death revealed traces of the same substance that Lisa had given to her children. In addition, Mark was found to have severe inflammation of the stomach. The family's lawyer claimed that Lisa met Mark, offered him a beer, and then put the poison in the drink. A glass with Lisa and Mark's fingerprints, as well as a swab containing the woman's DNA, was provided to authorities. Alleged motives for the murder included jealousy and money. It is also known that Lisa had asked Mark to help her financially, and there is evidence that he loaned her at least $120. Mark was Lisa's first known victim. The final outcome of this case, as well as that of Jose Luis Arrezo, remain unknown. They may not have been reported in the press, or the investigation may not yet have reached the stage of being formally charged and brought to trial. At the time of her brutal crimes, Lisa Maria was only 26 years old. Her high-profile criminal case has become one of the most horrific and disturbing in Ecuador's recent history. These crimes made her known throughout the country as Dona Venado. Lisa Maria Kaisi is recognized as a serial killer in Ecuador. Her victims have endured terrible suffering, and their relatives have suffered unbearable pain. The charges include 5 murders and 9 attempted murders. Under Ecuadorian law, the maximum sentence she could face is 40 years in prison. That means Lisa could be released when she turned 70 years old. It is still unclear what motivated Dona Venado to commit such horrific acts. Was her act the result of resentment for not getting what she expected in life? Many speculate that the motive was money, and in David's case, Lisa acted out of a lust for revenge, which led to the tragedy with her children. The most horrific part of this story is not only the number of victims left in the path of Dona Venado, but also the fate of 2 innocent children who could not have guessed that their mother, who gave them life, would take it away so absurdly and cruelly. Akia Shanta Eggleston was born on September 6, 1994 in Baltimore, Maryland, and grew up in the same place. Her single mother, Latina Wilkinson, raised her alone until her stepfather, Sean Wilkinson, stepped in. As her biological father was missing from her life, Akia soon became close with her stepfather, who worked at the Department of Labor. The oldest of her siblings, Akia was known as sweet, bubbly, and feisty. Her young age never stopped her from putting others before herself. Not only was she a great friend to everybody who knew her, but she was always there for the people she cared for. She was described by her stepfather as someone whom everyone loved and was excited to meet. Despite her small stature, she always participated in different activities, and dancing and singing were at the top of the list. She absolutely loved and put all her energy into dancing and entertaining people. Her happiness seemed to have faded away in 2012 when Akia's mother passed away from cancer when Akia was only 17. Having a close bond with her mother, Akia felt lonely after her demise, prompting her to be rebellious against her stepfather. However, over the years she picked up the pieces of her broken heart and learned to cope with her loss. Her stepfather, whom Akia considered her own father, was there for her through all of this. At the age of 20, Akia gave birth to a beautiful daughter. Despite being so young, she was a great mother to her child. Even though the child's father wasn't in the picture, she took all the responsibility as a single mother. She was always seen playing, dancing, and goofing around with her daughter. In 2017, at the age of 22, Akia became pregnant again, and this time with a boy. Weirdly enough, she decided to hide the identity of the unborn baby's father from her family. Nonetheless, Akia was thrilled to have her second baby. However, the pregnancy was not easy for her. The pregnancy was considered high risk due to her baby lying in a breech position inside her womb. While her due date was in June 2017, by May, 8-month pregnant Akia could barely walk. She was on bed rest and under the surveillance of the doctors at a Baltimore area hospital, where she sought medical help on a regular basis to monitor the pregnancy. Despite these difficulties, she did not want to be a burden on her family and lived in a shared apartment at 606 Cherry Crest Road in the Cherry Hill section of Baltimore. To celebrate the pregnancy, before her difficult delivery, Akia, along with her family, planned a baby shower that was scheduled for May 7th. For months, Akia planned for this event and had even put down a $900 deposit. The last update before her baby shower and gender reveal party her family had was on May 3rd. Akia was planning to get her hair done on that Friday, and she was supposed to pick out her and her daughter's dress. As expected, she was really looking forward to the party. On the scheduled date of May 7th, while friends and family gathered for the party, Akia was nowhere to be seen. Her family began to get concerned when she did not arrive even after 2 hours. Fearing that there might be a medical emergency, Akia's family went to her apartment to check on her. Unfortunately, she was not there either. Family members and friends then searched the area surrounding the residence but came up with nothing. After waiting for a few more hours, the family reported her missing to the local authorities. When detectives from the Baltimore Police Department arrived at Akia's residence, they found no signs of forced entry into the apartment. Family members told the investigators that certain items were missing from the apartment, including clothing and a dresser, but other old furniture and kitchen items were left behind. Oddly enough, on the drywall in Akia's room, 3 triangle-shaped punctures were discovered. As the investigation moved forward, detectives tried to find clues about her whereabouts. When they pulled the data from her phone, they discovered that shortly before her disappearance, Akia wrote on her Facebook wall that she missed her mother. Detectives also learned that May 3rd, 2017 was the last time anyone had heard from her. Akia exchanged messages with one of her friends telling her that she was moving to a new place with her unborn baby's father, whose identity was still hidden from the family. Detectives also extracted surveillance footage from a bank in downtown Baltimore, where Akia could be seen withdrawing money on May 3rd, 2017 at around 12:52 p.m. Wearing a green t-shirt and black joggers, Akia made a $450 cash withdrawal from her account. Based on a message on Akia's phone, detectives theorized that the money was for the down payment of her new place. This was the last time when the expectant mother was seen alive. Following these clues from the initial phase of the investigation, detectives were not considering the theory that Akia was in any kind of danger. Instead, they believed that she moved away on her own. Yet, Akia's family was adamant that there was something wrong, as they were sure she would never abandon her daughter like that. The family further insisted that with her pregnancy, it was practically impossible for her to move the furniture alone. However, authorities failed to find anyone that helped her with the process. Authorities also put out an alert to local hospitals as Akia, who would have needed the help of doctors to deliver her son due to her high-risk pregnancy. But no such cases were ever reported, leading Akia's whereabouts to remain a mystery. As time passed, detectives started to consider the possibility of foul play. Detectives questioned many people, including her friends and family, but no leads were found. The unborn baby's father, who was supposed to move in with Akia, was also interviewed. However, the police neither revealed his identity nor declared him a suspect. Akia's family held a vigil for her approximately 6 months after her disappearance, outside of her former apartment. As they were cleaning up, a friend spotted a bank card belonging to Akia underneath the brushes near the front door. The bank card, which was in good condition, looked to have been placed there by someone, as police had not found it during previous searches. Although police collected the card as evidence, no new clues could be extracted from it. Over the years, multiple search attempts have been conducted for Akia's remains in several places in Baltimore, but to no avail. The suspicious circumstances of her disappearance had garnered national attention from various media outlets, but none led to any evidence. In November 2017, a reward of $25,000 was also announced for any information regarding the missing mother, but eventually this also failed to provide any answer. The case would remain cold for 5 years until a review of the cold case cracked the mystery wide open. With the help of interviews, social media messages, and financial and telephone records, the Baltimore Cold Case Review team was finally able to construct a timeline regarding her disappearance, which eventually led them to a suspect, Michael Robertson, none other than the father of Akia's unborn son. Akia had met Robertson as a young child in 1990 when his grandmother babysat her. They reconnected years later at the birthday party of a mutual friend in 2016 and began dating shortly thereafter. However, Robertson, who was 35 years old at the time, was also involved in a relationship at the time with another 22-year-old woman with whom he had 2 children. After he got Akia pregnant, he got evicted from the apartment he shared with the mother of his 2 children. Just prior to her death, Akia had told several friends that she was planning to move in with her child's father while keeping his identity hidden. It was discovered that Robertson lied about wanting to move into a new place together, sending her a picture of a property. Police later questioned the property owners and discovered that they were never contacted by Robertson. Detectives also discovered that an argument had taken place between Robertson and his other mistress, who he had children with, the night before Akia's disappearance. And cell phone records show that Robertson was the last person with Akia. Yet, he lied about his last meeting with Akia and changed his story several times during the police interviews. But at the time, investigators did not have enough to hold him accountable. Additionally, investigators learned about the internet search history of Robertson's. He had conducted internet searches about trash pickup, dumpsters, and landfills in Baltimore 18 times prior to Akia's disappearance. This information suggested that Robertson disposed of Akia's remains in a dumpster around Baltimore. But even after extensive searches, Akia's body was never located. On February 1, 2022, a now 41-year-old Michael Robertson was arrested and taken into custody. He was charged with 2 first-degree murders of Akia and her unborn son. If convicted, he could face the maximum penalty of 2 life sentences. On March 20, 2020, in the city of Alua, Portugal, 20-year-old Diogo Goncalves went to meet a girl he admired greatly. Unfortunately, he had no foresight on how this seemingly romantic evening would culminate. The picturesque resort town of Albufeira, noted as one of the premier destinations in the Algarve region of southern Portugal, was Dee's birthplace in 1999. As an only child in a modest yet industrious family, whose livelihood hinged primarily on the fluctuations of tourism, Diogo was regarded by his parents as an exemplary son. Acquaintances described him as decent, responsible, hardworking, and reliable. Additionally, he was an outgoing young man who cherished the company of friends and family. Diogo pursued his high school education in his hometown and subsequently embarked on a computer science degree. To support his academic aspirations and contribute to household expenses, he began working at McDonald's at the age of 16 in 2015. By the time he was 17 and still employed with the renowned company, Diogo's life took an unforeseen and tragic turn. One day, his father suffered a stroke, which led to him being in a vegetative state. The media reported extensively on this event. Compounding their troubles that same year, as Diogo and his mother were grappling with this new challenge, another misfortune struck him hard. His mother, his unwavering supporter, was struck by a vehicle on her way to work at the mall where she was employed as a cleaner. She was dragged several meters by the car and fell into a ditch, sadly. She succumbed to her severe injuries. Even though the driver fled the scene initially, law enforcement officials were able to identify and bring him to justice. While awaiting legal proceedings against those responsible for both his parents' dire situations, it became necessary for Diogo's father to be placed in a specialized medical facility for appropriate care. His maternal aunt, concerned about his precarious circumstances, invited him to stay with her. However, due to irreconcilable differences that emerged after weeks together, cohabitation proved unfeasible. Subsequently confiding in a friend about these challenges led to an offer from his friend's parents. They provided him accommodation within their residence located in a Algarve neighborhood. This proximity alleviated some distress for Diogo, as living amongst familiar faces brought some semblance of comfort during such trying times. Despite being quite young, Diogo showcased remarkable skill in handling challenging situations through patience and optimism. At 18, he completed his degree in computer technology in 2017 and secured a 6-month internship at Villa Vita Park, a renowned 5-star tourist hotel. His performance there was noteworthy, leading the executives to offer him a technician role. In 2018, Diogo decided to accept this position, resigning from his job at a fast food restaurant chain where he had worked for nearly a year and attained the role of duty manager. He embarked on a new chapter of his life, anticipating numerous opportunities that would aid his progress after the difficulties he had faced. As Diogo began to settle into his new job and look towards a brighter future, he decided to purchase a car. He formed good relationships with colleagues, including Maria Malva, a 19-year-old security guard at the hotel, who particularly caught his attention. Like Diogo, Maria also came from humble beginnings and had encountered significant challenges. Her mother struggled with mental health issues. While her father abandoned the family early on, she never reconnected with him. Maria was passionate about martial arts and practiced karate. While she aspired to become a police officer, her application was rejected due to her tattoo. This setback led her to enroll in training at a security company specializing in various private security sectors. Diogo openly expressed his admiration for Maria from the start, but she did not reciprocate his feelings and was rather aloof towards him. Fabio Acosta, a close friend of Diogo's, mentioned that Diogo was infatuated with Maria. According to Fabio, Diogo's dedication to her was intense enough that he declined an attractive job offer from the Sheraton hotel chain in Lisbon because he did not wish to be separated from her. Additionally, when Maria was working her shift, Diogo often brought meals for her. As time went on, they became almost inseparable observers, frequently assumed they were a couple despite there being no romantic relationship between them. Maria confided in Diogo that she wanted no romantic involvement, as she had recently ended a toxic relationship with a naval officer, but simultaneously gave him mixed signals. Despite this ambiguity, Diogo never abandoned hope for a future with her, and continuously sought ways to be near her and show his affection through various gestures aimed at pleasing her. One day, Diogo was deeply disappointed when he stumbled upon a video on social media showing Maria kissing another girl on the lips. He felt upset because he believed she should have informed him that she did not like men and that this was why they would never be together. Fabio, Diogo's best friend, attempted to calm him by explaining that girls sometimes do this, but Diogo remained unconvinced. He insisted that she had misled him and that this was why she had rejected his romantic advances. Despite this disappointment, Diogo and Maria stayed friends. She continued to accept his gifts and invitations for dates. Many times, Diogo offered to walk her home, but she always mentioned that her roommate had a jealous boyfriend and did not want another man entering her apartment. Time went by, and in December 2019, Diogo learned he would finally receive compensation for his mother's death, which happened 3 years prior. After receiving the amount of 70,000 euros, he decided it was time to purchase a house so he wouldn't need to keep paying rent. Diogo then shared this exciting news with his friend Maria. Shortly thereafter, Maria resigned from her job at the hotel. She said she could no longer tolerate her coworkers' comments about the supposed relationship between her and Diogo. Additionally, she explained that she wanted more time with her mother, who required significant attention due to a mental illness. Initially, there was no reason to doubt her explanations. However, subsequent events hinted that her decision to quit might have been driven by more sinister motives. This is where Mariana Fona comes into play, 20-year-old nurse at the hospital who had a stable relationship with Maria. The two young women lived together in Mariana's parents' home, since they were not financially secure enough to live independently and enjoy their relationship fully. Maria found herself in this situation when she learned about the significant sum of money Diogo would receive. Interestingly, from that point onward, Maria started drawing closer to Diogo. It appears likely that Maria shared this information with Mariana together. They plotted to deceive him and gain access to his bank account details with the intention of stealing his compensation money. One day, after Diogo had repeatedly refused, Maria informed the young man that she wished to spend a romantic evening with him. This proposal was a surprising gift for the 20-year-old, who found it hard to believe his ears. After waiting for so long, the idea of being close to the girl he loved made him ecstatic. Their rendezvous was scheduled for Friday evening, March 20th, 2020. Diogo was elated and had no doubts about what might have led Maria to change her mind so abruptly. Although Maria and Mariana shared different accounts of what transpired that day, The following details are based on media reports and official information. Upon Diogo's arrival, Mariana offered him orange juice that she had brought herself. Unbeknownst to him, the drink contained a hidden ingredient: 3 ampoules of DIM, a central nervous system drug with anesthetic and sedative effects. Mariana reportedly proposed using this substance, which she had stolen from the hospital where she worked. The girl's plan entailed sedating Diogo to access his banking information and manipulate his fingers to unlock his phone. Mariana allegedly waited in a car outside while her friend executed their plan. She sent multiple texts to Maria checking if the drug had taken effect since it was acting slower than anticipated. Inside, tensions rose as Diogo grew increasingly unnerved without understanding what was happening. Attempting to calm him, Maria promised an erotic dance but insisted on tying him to a table first. After several minutes in this restrained position, Diogo panicked and pleaded with Maria to release him. Her demeanor turned aggressive as they began to struggle. Using her martial arts skills, she overpowered Diogo, bringing him down and restraining his neck with her arms, yet cutting off his air supply. According to Mariana's account, Maria eventually summoned her into the apartment. Mariana found Diogo on the floor and questioned Maria about deviating from their original plan, merely stealing his keys and taking his money. Upon discovering that Diogo was unresponsive, the nurse administered resuscitative measures. Upon awakening in a highly agitated state, he attempted to attack Mariana. Perhaps recognizing another conspirator against him, he tried defending himself. Reacting to Diogo's aggressive response towards her friend, Maria intervened by grabbing him from behind once more, bringing him down and constricting his neck again. In light of these events, both women's actions have been scrutinized as part ongoing investigations rooted in available evidence and testimonies provided by those involved. Diogo's life tragically ended at the hands of the girl he loved. His body lay in the living room of Maria and Mariana's house, where they immediately set about their planned robbery. They first cut off his thumb and index finger to unlock his phone, access a mobile payment app, and transfer money. This process took several days due to a daily transaction limit. The crime occurred just as 9 out of 19 restrictions began, with remote working becoming commonplace. Diogo was supposed to go to work the next day. The girls attempted to prevent his coworkers from noticing his absence and raising concerns. They sent a message from Diogo's phone to an IT colleague, stating Diogo could not go to work and needed a replacement. This message raised suspicion because Diogo wasn't known for making such requests at short notice. When asked if everything was all right, Diogo's phone responded affirmatively. Conversations between this hotel employee and others continued through Friday into part of Saturday, but the messages increasingly seemed uncharacteristic of Diogo. One of these messages reached Diogo's supervisor, stating Diogo wouldn't return to work as he had met a woman from France and would be moving in with her. This struck the boss as odd, since Diogo was known for his reliability and wouldn't abruptly leave his job. Seeking clarification, the supervisor tried calling Diogo, but received no answer. Another message claimed Diogo wasn't in a condition for phone calls. The supervisor responded that hearing directly from Diogo would be reassuring. The reactions from Diogo's loved ones to these impersonated messages led Maria and Mariana to adjust their strategy regarding his disappearance. They decided to fabricate a scenario suggesting that Diogo had taken his own life and then plotted to dismember his remains for disposal. Maria later confessed their plan was inspired by the TV series Dexter, which depicts a forensic expert who eliminates criminals while erasing traces of his crimes by dismembering victims. These actions highlight how communication breakdowns and erratic behaviors can raise suspicions and lead authorities closer to uncovering criminal deeds, even when efforts are made to mislead those searching for answers. After executing their reprehensible plan, they placed Diogo's body in trash bags, storing them in the trunk of their vehicle. They then proceeded to an ATM and a shopping mall. Security cameras captured them hugging and laughing. Upon returning to their residence, they began the gruesome task of dismembering body. Diogo's torso was eventually placed in a black bag, with the remaining parts disposed of in a container. During these events at Mariana's parental home, Diogo's friends initiated a campaign to report him missing and contacted the authorities. The authorities waited the mandatory 48 hours before officially declaring him missing. Subsequently, the girls departed from the house. Maria drove Diogo's car towards the cliff near Cabo de San Vicente Lighthouse, with Mariana following in her own car. At approximately 2 p.m., Mariana discarded Diogo's torso off the cliff, abandoning his car nearby to create an impression that Diogo had ended his own life. Unfortunately for them, Maria did not anticipate that instead of falling into the sea, the remains would become lodged on a rock. The girls then departed together in Mariana's car. They drove approximately 7 kilometers to the Pico do Inferno waterfall in Tavira, where they disposed of what remained of Diogo into the water. Shortly after this incident, Diogo's vehicle was discovered in a parking lot near Cabo de San Vicente Lighthouse. Reports indicated that 2 laptops were found within the car. Forensic police arrived promptly and conducted thorough land and sea searches. This led to the discovery of a young man's torso, partially enveloped by a black garbage bag near one location along the coast. Simultaneously, at another coastal site, Pico do Inferno, a French couple made a horrifying discovery: Diogo's head. After extensive efforts from law enforcement officers, his hands and feet were also recovered. The investigators handling this case found several aspects puzzling, considering that Diogo appeared to be an unassuming individual who avoided unsavory company. Based on collected data about him, further probing by authorities revealed that Diogo had received significant compensation following his mother's death. They uncovered substantial transfers from Diogo's account to Maria's account through monetary transactions tracking methodically carried out by investigators. The detective's next step was to locate Maria and clarify why Diogo's funds ended up with her. The girl then attempted to persuade the police that she had killed the young man because he was attempting to abuse her. She asserted this as the reason she left the hotel before the incident. However, an examination of the text messages between the victim and Maria revealed that this was not true. She and Diogo had grown closer after Maria stopped working. During her first interaction with the officers, Maria claimed sole responsibility for planning and executing the actions leading to the fatal shooting. She emphasized that Mariana had no involvement in the crime. However, Mariana's account contradicted Maria's claims. The nurse stated that Maria confided in her a plan to steal Diogo's money, but intended to take his life as well. She wanted him to suffer enough to disclose his bank account password. The collected evidence proved sufficient for convicting both girls. Investigators had phone records, the deceased cell phone, and ATM surveillance footage at their disposal. Maria and Mariana were arrested on April 1, 2020, and appeared in court in June of that year. The judge meticulously followed Maria's recounting of events, where she insisted on pleading guilty and denied any involvement of Mariana. According to her version, Diogo's body remained for 2 days in a car parked in a garage, and it was there that his remains were dismembered when Mariana's family slept. After hearing Mariana's detailed account of events, the judge repeatedly asked about her whereabouts during the dismemberment executed with surgical precision at the joints. The courtroom's attention turned towards Mariana. She anticipated these questions and stated that since everyone knew she worked at a hospital, they assumed she dismembered the corpse herself. To clarify matters further, she suggested using internet resources for verification. Given the seriousness of this cold, calculated, reckless, and brutal crime, both individuals received custodial sentences, as determined by the judge. A few months later, on February 24, 2021, the trial began. During her testimony on February 26, 2021, confirmed that she initially wanted revenge on Diogo for the alleged attempted violence, but stated she did not intend to take his life. The defendant admitted her intent was to humiliate the victim and verified that her friend had no relationship with the young man and was unaware of the alleged attempted violence. Maria also asserted that her actions were not motivated by compensation. The girls appeared in court together, however, they did not look at each other throughout the trial. Rumor suggests that after their arrest and subsequent jail time, they decided to end their relationship. The trial included testimony from several witnesses, including forensic expert Teresa Costa. The expert explained that the amount of dipam found in Diogo's blood was significantly less than expected from 3 ampoules, suggesting either Diogo had not taken the prescribed dose or had ingested it many hours before his death. On April 27, 2021, the court issued its decision. Maria was found guilty of aggravated murder, accessory to desecration of a body, robbery, unlawful access, and fraud. Additionally, she was convicted of carjacking and possession of an illegal weapon. She received a sentence of 25 years in prison and was ordered to pay Diogo's father €265,000 in compensation. Mariana was acquitted of murder but found guilty of desecrating a corpse and complicity in fraud. For this, she received a sentence of 4 years in prison. She was released because none of the offenses involved pretrial detention until final sentencing. The court concluded that Mariana's attempt to revive Diogo demonstrated she did not intend to kill him. In reaching this decision, the judge took into account Mariana's confession where she expressed full responsibility for her actions. However, this verdict was not well received by the Portuguese public, who viewed Mariana as equally culpable in the heinous crime against Diogo as Maria. Following the verdict, Mariana exited through the back door where her father, present at all hearings, awaited her. Both refrained from making any statements to reporters. On the early morning of July 17, 2007, at about 1:20 a.m., the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Department received a chilling 911 call. The call surmised a landlord confessing about a fatal altercation with his tenant. When deputies arrived at the Nature's Trail mobile home park, they were greeted by a bloody crime scene. The park was located off Morris Bridge Road at Thono Tasassa in Hillsborough County. Jonathan Burns, who was 43 at the time, co-owned the park while also living within it. He repeated the story to the deputies of how he got into an altercation with his female tenant, which led to her tragic death. Burns claimed his tenant attacked and stabbed him and showed 2 knife wounds to his abdomen as evidence. Deputies found the lifeless body of the tenant, who was identified as 41-year-old Tanya and Ottman, lying on her back on the ground outside her rented mobile home. She had been stabbed 4 times in her chest, along with a large laceration to her neck. A potential blood trail was located in the area of a trash bin, which was only about 29 feet away from the dead body. The blood trail ended inside the Burns home. Upon searching the home, investigators also discovered the murder weapon inside in the form of a bloody knife. As Burns was taken to the hospital, Tanya's body was taken to the medical examiner's office to perform an autopsy. Doctors from the Tampa General Hospital, where Burns was taken for his injuries, concluded that his mid-abdomen knife wounds needed surgeries to heal. Other than knife wounds, both of his arms were covered with scratches along with small lacerations on his fingers. The results of the autopsy performed on Tanya's corpse concluded that she died from fatal stab wounds to the chest that penetrated her heart and lungs. If Burns' account was to be believed, it was a classic case of self-defense. However, there were some anomalies in this version of the story that raised suspicion in the minds of the investigators. Forensic tests performed on the murder weapon and the blood found on the ground at the crime scene suggest that both of the items matched Burns' DNA profile. However, contradictory to Burns' story, it was concluded that Burns' blood was not found near Tanya's body, and Tanya's blood was not found near the dumpster. Detectives further learned that Tanya regularly used a walker and wheelchair to cope with her disability, and she was mostly unstable to stand on her feet. This condition made her incapable of attacking someone with the intent of serious injury. As investigators were having a hard time believing that Burns killed Tanya as a desperate measure of self-defense, they wanted to prosecute him with the murder charge. However, when the case was presented to the state attorney's office, the report concluded that there was insufficient evidence to refute Burns' version of the events. Unfortunately, without any solid evidence against the man responsible for Tanya's death, investigators came out empty-handed and the case went cold. It would take 14 years for the mystery to be solved. Last year, in 2021, the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Department Cold Case Unit began reviewing the case in the hopes of finding new clues. After closely looking at all the circumstantial and physical evidence, a detective went to Burns on January 14, 2022 and interviewed him about the events surrounding Tanya's stabbing. Once again describing the details of that fateful night, Burns told the detective that he had been drinking heavily that night when he heard Tanya yelling at him. At first, he walked to the laundry room to close it, then made up his mind to confront her. He claimed that he walked over to her mobile home and Tanya punched him in the stomach. Said he did not notice anything at the moment, but soon panicked, realizing that he was bleeding. He further said that Tanya was not armed with any type of weapon and never took his knife, yet he said she had somehow stabbed him. Apparently, detectives could tell that Burns was lying. However, as they started to strategize as to how to build a strong case, they got an unexpected breakthrough. More than a week after that interview, a witness contacted the sheriff's office, saying that she had information on a cold case from 2007. During an interview with a detective, the witness said that Burns had approached her in the mobile home park just after the detective left on January 14, 2007, and told her that he knew he did something wrong. He further claimed that he was confessing because he wanted to face it. The witness also said that Burns told her he knew Tanya was disabled at the time of her demise. The witness said Burns provided her with a signed letter containing the details of the incident, which she passed on to the detective. Just 2 days later, the police department reviewed one more call from the witness. The witness said that this time Burns had approached her and told her he wrote the letter in an attempt to prove that he was acting in self-defense, as he figured he would get less time for a self-defense case rather than a first-degree murder. However, the witness also shared that Burns told her that he did not regret killing Tanya, as she only got what she deserved, indicating a hatred towards the deceased woman. On January 28, 2022, the witness gave the detectives a second statement, allegedly written and signed by Burns, but it contradicted the first statement. There were many discrepancies between what was contained in the letter and what he was telling the witness verbally too. In February 2022, the witness contacted the detective yet again and said that Burns had given her yet another statement after she confronted him with the contradictions between the letter and his verbal account. During the confrontation, the witness's son was also present at the scene, and they both asked Burns how he was stabbed. Burns confessed to the witnesses that he noticed Tanya while walking to the laundry room. Intending serious harm, he returned home to get his knife before walking over to talk to her. Burns said an argument led to them fighting over the knife, and when Tanya tried to go home, he stabbed her several times and cut her throat. He then stabbed himself in the stomach after the incident to frame a self-defense scenario. Burns went on to provide the witness with a third written statement saying it contained the truth. Burns ended the letter with an admission that he already had hatred in his mind towards Tanya, which prompted him to deliberately hurt her that night, and ended up killing her. The details in the third statement were consistent with evidence collected at the crime scene. According to the affidavit, and investigators matched a latent fingerprint on one of the statements to Burns. In a statement, he said, "This was a terrible tragedy that I am responsible for. I wish I could change it." Whether the remorse was fake or not, on February 3, 2022, authorities took him into custody and charged him with Tanya's murder, dragging him to the path of justice he should have faced long ago. In December 2018, a group of university peers brought 20-year-old Sander Deer to the emergency room. He was unconscious, notably pale, and his skin was cold and unresponsive to any stimuli, which left the doctors completely perplexed. Here lay a fit, active young adult without any history of illness, yet his body temperature was merely 27 degrees Celsius, indicating a comatose state. Medical examinations revealed that he had hyponatremia, an alarmingly high level of sodium in his system. Typically, an adult ingests about 5 grams of salt daily, equating to about 2 grams of sodium. However, Sander had 160 grams of sodium in his body, surpassing the 2-month average intake for one person. The medical team questioned these so-called university friends about what had happened with Sander. They asked about his activities the previous night. The friends simply shrugged their shoulders, averted their eyes, and acted as if they knew nothing about Sander's condition. Clearly, something was amiss here. Despite the relentless efforts of the medical professionals to save him, 20-year-old Sander succumbed to multi-organ failure, a condition where critical body systems cease functioning. The autopsy revealed startling findings. The pathologist examined the contents of Sander's stomach to understand why a seemingly healthy university student suddenly died. To their astonishment and dismay, They discovered there was no food or water in his stomach over the past 2 days. Instead, peculiar items such as aquarium goldfish and heads of mice and eels were found inside him. This indicated that he had endured horrific experiences before his untimely death. The case of Sander garnered immense attention from online communities and media alike, rapidly becoming a topic of international discussion. Conversations erupted around universities potentially concealing the shocking misdeeds of their students and the impunity enjoyed by offspring from affluent families. This situation shone a spotlight on a student fraternity known as Rus. Established over 7 decades ago, with its symbol being a Flemish lion, this secret fraternity consists solely of male students majoring in law, engineering, and business, with around 30 active members, mostly hailing from prominent backgrounds. The family's Rus is considered one of the most prestigious groups at the esteemed Catholic University of Louvain in Belgium. Almost every student aspired to join this exclusive brotherhood. Each year, they accepted only 2 or 3 new members, adding to its exclusivity. Rumors abounded about the fraternity, enhancing its allure and making it even more enigmatic and elusive. It symbolized a kind of student aristocracy with significant influence within the educational institution. In the meantime, the student fraternity Rios resumed its activities. They prepared a unique selection of items for their annual initiation tradition for new members. This initiation menu included unusual starters such as grasshoppers and cockroaches, followed by a main course featuring live mice and fish. The dessert was a combination of coffee with an illicit substance. A disconcerting image showcasing the fraternity's initiation ceremony circulated widely. In the photo, principal members of the group were dressed in warm outerwear like coats and cloaks, while 4 initiates faced challenges on their knees. In one startling display, an initiate had a pistol pointed at his head. Another faced the barrel of a rifle. This photograph raised numerous questions. What other types of ceremonies did this clandestine group conduct? What exactly happened within the fraternity's walls? Considering many members sons of politicians, lawyers, distinguished doctors, and business leaders, one wondered, to what lengths would they go to protect their offspring if a truly grave incident occurred? Sadia wasn't actually aspiring to join the Rios Brotherhood. Born in Belgium, he was acutely aware of his fortunate circumstances. His father had come from Senegal, seeking asylum in another nation before Sadia's birth. Like many immigrant fathers, he sacrificed greatly to ensure his 2 sons could lead respectable lives. He understood that due to their skin color, his children would have to work doubly hard to earn the same respect and career opportunities as native Belgians. Mr. Diaz's father worked long hours at a factory, spent nights mastering the local language, and either found or sacrificed sleep to assist his sons with their schoolwork. His only dream was for his sons to succeed in life. From an early age, Sander conscious of his future, he realized that success wouldn't come easily. It required persistent hard work. Since kindergarten, Sander had a close friend named Ferry, who lived just a 5-minute walk away. They were inseparable. They shared interests such as biking and manga, and they dreamed of attending university, securing good jobs, saving money, and eventually relocating to Japan. They even made a pinky promise to remain lifelong best friends, and one day travel to the land of the rising sun together. However, Sander was never fated to see the birthplace of manga and anime. Beyond Ferry, Sander had numerous friends. As a teenager, he excelled effortlessly in everything he tried, whether it was solving complex mathematical problems or playing football for the first time. He amazed his friends with his natural talent. Though people often envy such gifted individuals, Sander was beloved for his charisma and approachability. His knack for conversation and ability to connect with everyone made it easy for him to make friends. After completing high school, Sander enrolled at the University of Leuven, becoming the first in his family to attend such a distinguished higher education institution. This achievement filled his father with immense pride, surpassing any dream he had ever envisioned. Although the university was just a 30-minute drive from home, Sander opted to stay in a dormitory. He chose civil engineering as his major and dedicated himself from the start to earning a master's degree in the field. Sander appeared wise beyond his years and was driven by a desire to make his father proud. His ambition was to graduate, secure a well-paying job, and enable his father to retire, repaying the sacrifices made for his children's future. By 2018, Diaz was in his third year of the 5-year program. He was already focused on securing employment post-graduation, so he steered clear of the party scene. His concentration was firmly on finding a lucrative job to support his family and pay bills. Aware of the potential challenges his skin color might present in landing a desirable position in a predominantly European tightly knit industry, Sander was under no illusion about the difficulty of his task. Armed with high academic achievements, interpersonal skills, and unwavering diligence, he recognized the importance of establishing vital connections. This realization led him to consider joining the Roy Brotherhood, a group synonymous with prestige, social networking, exclusivity, and, crucially, the connections needed for his career. In a world where not just merit but also influential connections are highly valued, this seemed like a strategic move. Many members of the Roy Brotherhood hailed from well-known families. Sander's decision to apply surprised his friends, except for his older brother, who saw the potential career benefits of such societies. His childhood friend Ferry believed in Sander's natural sociability and friendliness, but was initially doubtful about these fraternities. Ferry even tried to discourage Sanders from what he saw as a hazardous step. If only Ferry had known the tragic outcome that would befall Sander, he would never have ceased his efforts to dissuade him. For Sander, the decision to join Roy wasn't made lightly. He carefully considered both advantages and disadvantages before deciding to proceed. With only 2 years remaining in his program in 2018, Sander was among the 10 students who successfully navigated the stringent selection process of Roy. Among these 10, only 3, including Sander, advanced to the final initiation stage. The initial phase involved the fraternity's permanent members filtering out candidates who didn't align with their interests, character, or communication styles. Now narrowed down to 3, the real ordeal commenced, a grueling 2 months of evaluation by the elite student group, culminating in an extensive initiation ceremony spanning 2 to 3 days during this period. The new recruits were subjected to relentless and sophisticated ridicule without any breaks, completely at the mercy of the fraternity's members. Sander was aware of the harsh trials that lay ahead. He had heard tales of the brutal initiation rites. Nonetheless, he was willing to endure all the discomfort and repulsive challenges for a promising future. Just like the other 2 candidates, Jia understood the process would be tough, involving mockery and pushing them to their limits. However, no one anticipates risking their life in such situations. Sander had discussed this with a campus friend, a member of a different fraternity, who was unaware of Rouse's specific initiation practices. This friend portrayed the initiation as merely a test of physical stamina, commitment to future fraternity brothers, and discipline. Although unpleasant, he believed it was a necessary and ultimately worthwhile experience. Sander found the mandatory gatherings intolerable, especially as he was compelled to consume excessive amounts of alcohol. More distressingly, as part of the initiation, he was required to drink the urine of fraternity members. He, along with the other novices, faced relentless verbal and psychological torment. However, Deer endured the most severe hardships. He was derided for his skin tone. In October 2018, a few months before the concluding ritual, the Brotherhood organized a significant event at the Student Union building. The aspirants were made to kneel, while established members took turns forcing them to gulp down potent spirits or several liters of beer continuously. Naturally, after ingesting such volumes of alcohol, the novices could barely stand, yet were still tasked with cleaning the venue. In their disoriented state, they staggered around, mopping up their own and others' regurgitation. That evening, all 3 novices were obliged to clean, but the brothers devised a different plan. They determined that Sander alone should tidy up after the celebration, because historically those with dark skin served whites. This was a particularly harsh declaration. Deer felt utterly powerless at that moment. He was resolute in attaining his objective. He knew this situation would eventually reach a conclusion. A representative from the student association tried to reprimand the young men for their remarks. But what could he possibly do against 20 wealthy, noble, influential, and pampered youths? They were unafraid of anyone and conducted these acts openly without any sense of embarrassment. The fraternity members saw themselves as superior to all and simply warned the staff member not to meddle in their affairs. Sander endeavored earnestly to gain acceptance, considering his future prospects. But at just 20 years old, he was still somewhat naive. Despite this dreadful event, Deer persisted in attending fraternity gatherings. Some might question why Deer continued to seek camaraderie with these individuals. His reasons were multifaceted. Firstly, he played soccer with some of them and interacted amicably. Secondly, Sander was acutely aware of the extensive sacrifices his father had made for his education and vowed to meet those expectations. He harbored hopes that the indignities would cease once he cleared the final hurdle. In Rose's 70-plus years of history, only 2 members had been of African heritage, and presently only one was surviving. A dark-skinned student had been inducted in 2015, and Sander was poised to be the second to undergo the ultimate initiation rite. The final initiation, also termed baptism, was about to commence. Everything the novices had endured thus far seemed insignificant compared to the ordeal they were set to face. On December 4, 2018, at 4 p.m., the initiation commenced. Sander, along with 2 other candidates, donned lengthy flowing white robes and ventured into the city carrying bouquets of flowers. Their objective? To sell as many flowers as possible. The one who sold the fewest would endure various penalties, such as drinking sour milk, birdseed, and inevitably forced alcohol consumption. Sander finished last, selling 30 roses fewer than his peers, which led to his punishment, consuming such an excessive amount of alcohol, that his speech became severely impaired in the second phase of the initiation. The novices were positioned on their knees and asked straightforward questions by 7 p.m. The fraternity members remained indifferent to Dia's struggle in articulating responses. Predictably, he was outperformed by the others and subjected to further punishment. At the end of this stage, 1.5 bottles of gin were forced upon him. His body, not accustomed to heavy drinking, began to react violently. His stomach contained nothing but alcohol, and his complexion turned ashen. He was unable to stand, speak, or move autonomously, teetering on the brink of dehydration and repeatedly losing consciousness. Astonishingly, all these events unfolded in a public setting. One fraternity member recounted that the second trial occurred right on the sidewalk in front of a cafe in the city square. Yet none of the bystanders intervened. They neither alerted the authorities nor called for police assistance. At 9 p.m., the third challenge commenced, aptly titled, Endure the Night. The novices were hauled back to the dormitory, where 18 fraternity brothers resumed their relentless hazing. The task was to consume as many pints of beer as feasible. By the trial's conclusion, all 3 participants had become unconscious. They were breathing, but unresponsive to any attempts to rouse them. Remarkably, their unconscious state did not exempt them from ongoing abuse. In line with the fraternity's customs, if someone fainted at a gathering, they were urinated on, a manifestation of perceived frailty, and an opportunity for others to exert dominance. Proof of these acts was captured in a video taken at 11:40 p.m., which they subsequently attempted to erase. With the first day's competition at an end, the 3 new initiates were dragged to their quarters and unceremoniously deposited on their beds. For amusement, their water supply was disabled, possessions defaced with ketchup and chocolate, and their door locked. This action meant that should any of them regain consciousness after consuming such a lethal volume of alcohol, they would remain trapped inside. They didn't even have access to water to alleviate their thirst. This was just the initial day of the initiation at one of the nation's most esteemed universities. Yet the most distressing experiences were still to come. The following day, December 5, 2018, around 10:30 a.m., the fraternity members prepared for the final stages of the grueling initiation. They woke the 3 initiates, placed them in vehicles, and drove out of the city to a secluded village roughly an hour away. A fraternity member owned a small cottage there, hidden by thick woods, an ideal location to conceal their activities. En route, they made several stops to acquire items necessary for the ceremony. The students bought aquarium fish, eels, live rodents, as well as bird and dog feed from a pet store. Next, they visited a supermarket and obtained fish sauce used in Asian cuisine for its flavor-enhancing qualities. It's high in sodium, with about 1,670 milligrams per tablespoon, around 70% of the advised daily intake, and isn't typically consumed in large amounts. They also purchased duck eggs, sardines, clams, shrimp paste, mussels, among other products. During one of these stops, they encountered an academic who noticed that one of the students apparently needed assistance. She voiced her concerns to the fraternity members and even suggested calling the police. However, the students convincingly reassured her that he was merely intoxicated and in shock. They assured her that the initiation had ended and they intended to sober him up with a cold bath. Dismissing her concerns, the group proceeded to the cabin in the forest. The details of what happened next were reconstructed by police using recovered deleted video footage and scarce evidence. However, the full truth remains unclear. Over several hours, the 3 initiates were forced to dig a substantial trench into which they were subsequently placed. Struggling to keep warm, they found themselves surrounded by 18 young adult men, other fraternity members, who filled this trench with freezing water and livels. In Belgium, in December, the average temperature varies from +3 to 7 degrees Celsius. When initiates began to cold, permanent members of the fraternity urinated on them above, as a twisted way to warm them up. At this point, Sander was suffering from dehydration and remained inebriated from the previous night's events. Even if he had the will to stand and leave, his physical state made it impossible. Under normal circumstances, to formally reject the initiation process, one simply had to ring a bell placed away from the trench, therefore forfeiting their place in the fraternity. The initiates could have accessed this bell at any time. However, in this case, the bell was either intentionally or inadvertently omitted, leaving Sander without a way to signify his refusal of the initiation. His inability to stand or speak due to his condition rendered him powerless. The 3 inebriated and weary boys sat in the icy water, subjected to the senior fraternity members' acts of urination and defecation. They were then coerced into biting off the heads of live mice and eels in the water and followed with fish oil. After enduring over 6 hours in such brutal conditions, Sander's body began shutting down and he started losing consciousness. He was extracted from the water, clothed in dry garments and placed beside a fire. As he curled up on the grass in a fetal position for 2 hours, initiation rites carried on around him instead of receiving medical attention. The students documented the situation with photos and videos, while Sander emitted distressing sounds indicative of excruciating pain. The excessive intake of sodium triggered severe elevation in Sander's blood pressure, resulting in a nosebleed, and he became entirely unresponsive. At 8:57 p.m., a senior fraternity member eventually decided to contact emergency services. Following their advice, students transported an unconscious Sander to a hospital but placed his body in the trunk to prevent soiling the car's interior. Upon arrival at the emergency department, fraternity members withheld crucial information regarding Sander's recent diet and alcohol consumption from the medical team. After leaving him in the care of the hospital staff, they departed with the intention of resuming the initiation upon his discharge. This action left Sander with no real chance of recovery. While the medical professionals conducted tests and endeavored to unravel the cause of his condition, Sander's organs began failing due to the severity of his state. He was transferred to Ant P University Hospital for its superior facilities. At Ant P University Hospital, Sander's heart ceased functioning. He slipped into a coma, and subsequently, the 20-year-old tragically lost his life. The primary cause of death was identified as toxic levels of sodium in his body, a direct result of excessive fish source consumption. The hospital informed the police, prompting an immediate investigation into the circumstances surrounding his death. By 10:40 p.m., the other 2 initiates who had continued with the ritual were also hospitalized. Upon learning of their children's dire condition, the parents hurried to the hospital. Meanwhile, fraternity members hastily worked to erase any evidence of the initiation. They filled in the trench used for the trials, cleaned up a room smeared with ketchup and chocolate, reinstated water supply, and purged their phones of incriminating messages, photos, and videos. By the time police arrived at the scene, there was no physical evidence left. However, investigators were later able to recover deleted data from mobile devices. Despite this recovery, significant hurdles were encountered during the investigation. The children involved belonged to influential families whose parents quickly sought legal representation. Though evidence implicating 18 fraternity members in Sanders' death grew stronger, continuous obstruction from high-powered parents protracted the investigation. All 18 students wiped their social media profiles and limited their communication, speaking only through their attorneys. Following Sanders' tragic death, Rio's fraternity was dissolved. The university imposed disciplinary measures on all involved, requiring them to complete 30 hours of community service and write an essay on tradition's role in student organizations. Remarkably, none of the participants were expelled from the university. The 18 individuals involved in the incident completed their education without significant repercussions. In response to this outcome, teachers aware of the situation authored an open letter advocating for harsher penalties for the group, but no additional measures were enforced against these students. The formal legal process concluded in July 2020. Following this, attorneys representing 2 members sought further investigations, seemingly as a tactic to reframe the entire incident as a tragic accident and attribute blame to the deceased student for purportedly weak health. It wasn't until May 26, 2023, that the Court of Appeal delivered its verdict, finding the 18 fraternity members guilty of involuntary manslaughter and degrading treatment. Each was fined €400 and sentenced to perform community service. Additionally, they were collectively ordered to pay approximately €30,000 in compensation to the family to avoid impacting their future prospects. The students' identities were withheld. The leniency of the verdict for those responsible for the death sparked widespread dissent, leading to protest actions in various cities. Despite these demonstrations, no substantial changes have been reported as a consequence in this case. The perceived lack of justice remains a poignant aspect of this story. Today's case will take us to the city of Miramar. The beautiful city is located in southern Broward County, Florida, and boasts a population of more than 120,000 people. Miramar is famous for its tropical weather and breathtaking scenery. All of these, coupled with its numerous tourist attractions, make it one of the most popular tourist destinations in the United States. Evelyn Marie Fisher was born to her parents, Charles and Ethel Fisher, on March 23, 1947, in Sardis, a small community located on the south side of Chilliwack, Canada. Evelyn attended Chilliwack Senior Secondary School, and after graduation, she proceeded to study at the Riverview School of Psychiatry, Nursing. Within a few years, she completed her studies and became a fully licensed psychiatric nurse. While working at a hospital in Vancouver, Evelyn would meet the love of her life, John Bamforth. This was in 1969. John was a bartender at a bar that Evelyn and her friends visited regularly. "The first time I saw her, I fell for her, you know?" John said of Evelyn. It wasn't long before John found his way into Evelyn's heart, and the two started a romantic relationship. Everyone who knew them could not help but notice that they were a match made in heaven. She was just great to be around. "I never had any regrets about being with her," John said. A few years into their relationship, John got offered a better job in Grand Cayman, and due to this, he had to move out of Vancouver. Not wanting distance to be a barrier to their relationship, Evelyn made a sacrifice. She quit her job at the hospital where she worked, packed her bags, and traveled down to Grand Cayman to be with John. After settling down in the new place, the two eventually got married and spent the next couple of months enjoying a blissful and incident-free time together. With each passing day, their love for each other kept growing stronger, and it seemed as if they both had their whole lives ahead of them. But after only 2 years in Grand Cayman, Evelyn had grown tired of the place. She just could not see herself living the rest of her life there. She eventually spoke to John concerning this, and also told him about her desire to move somewhere else. John had not expected this, but he knew that if she continued living in Grand Cayman, she would be unhappy. So he gave her his full support. "She left me and she went to Miami, and 3 days later I quit my job and followed her," John said. In Miami, the couple found accommodation at the Haven Lakes Estate mobile home park, located in Miramar. They also both got jobs and began their lives afresh. Evelyn was happy and content, and so was John. In the blink of an eye, 6 years had gone by. At some point, a female friend of the couple moved in with them. It's not clear when exactly or why she started living with them, but she was welcomed with open arms. On January 22, 1980, John kissed his wife goodbye, left the house, and made for his place of work. The friend of the couple also went about her business, and Evelyn was the only one left at home. The day was just like every other day in their lives, and none of them had any idea that something terrible would soon happen. At the time, Evelyn had undergone knee surgery and had to take time off work to recover. There was really nothing to worry about, and it was expected that she would be back to full health in no time. On the night of that same day, the friend of the couple returned from her outing. It had been a long day, and she couldn't wait to be fast asleep in her bed. However, when she tried the front door, she realized that it was locked. There was nothing strange about this because she knew that either Evelyn or John had locked the door since it had already gotten dark. At that point, she had no idea if only one or both of them were home. Not wanting to disturb whoever was inside, she searched through her bag for her spare key, soon realized that she had not taken it with her when she had left the house. It slowly dawned on her that she could spend the whole night outside if she did not attempt to let whoever was inside know she was around. She knocked on the door and waited, but got no response. It was dead silent except for the occasional honk of motor vehicles in the distance. She knocked again, this time calling out both John and Evelyn's name, but still she got no response. Soon she was banging on the door as loud as she could, but no one came to open it. With each passing second, she got more anxious and knew deep down that something was terribly wrong. There was no way no one inside the house would not have heard all the noise she was making. It was all so strange. She also tried other doors leading to the house, but found all of them locked as well. She soon decided that it was best to involve the police. She immediately placed an emergency call and told the dispatcher what was happening. In a matter of minutes, officers from the Miramar Police Department arrived on the scene. They proceeded to join her in knocking on the doors and even went as far as knocking on the windows of the house, but still no sound was heard from within. After doing this for several minutes, officers decided to force entry into the house. It was the only way they could be sure no one was inside. The front door was soon broken down, and they all proceeded cautiously into the silent house. There was nobody in the living room and nothing seemed out of place. From there, they made their way to the bedroom. The sight that awaited them, there was nothing they could have been prepared for. Lying on a blood-soaked bed was Evelyn. It was like a scene straight out of a horror movie. The friend of the couple gasped at the sight before her eyes. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. Evelyn was motionless, and upon closer inspection, it was discovered that she was dead. It was obvious that whoever killed her had used an object to smash in her head. Police officers immediately secured the scene and began to perform a thorough sweep of the house. Meanwhile, John had gotten off work and was on his way home. To him, nothing seemed off and he was in a good mood. The night air smelled fresher and felt cooler than ever. From a distance, he saw the police vehicles parked in front of his house and was surprised and at the same time alarmed by this. He knew instantly that something was very wrong. He quickened his pace, and as he got closer to the house, he noticed the police tape at the front door. At that point, fear gripped his heart. Not knowing what to expect, he made his way over to the tape and into the house. Inside, he was greeted by the unfamiliar faces of police officers. And that's when I saw what I saw, which was furniture disturbed, cushions disturbed, and then I walked back to the bedroom. Half the bed, at least, was soaked with blood, John said. Evelyn's body had already been moved to the hospital for an autopsy. The police officers then filled him in on everything that had happened, and he could hardly hold back his tears when he was told his wife was dead. He was allowed to make a cup of tea to calm his nerves, and after that he proceeded to the station with some officers for questioning. At the station, he told detectives everything he knew, and after what seemed like a long time, he was allowed to go back home. The result of the autopsy conducted on Evelyn was out a few days later. It showed that she had been sexually assaulted and then killed by whoever assaulted her. Detectives were able to collect DNA from her body, but since the technology at the time was not yet advanced enough to run an analysis, it was stored for the future. Detectives began their investigation immediately, but there was not much for them to work with. John, on the other hand, was crying himself to sleep every night. He blamed himself for not being at home on the night that his wife was murdered. He believed that if he had been with her, she would have been alive. "I had a lot of guilt at the time because I wasn't home when I should have been," John said. In February 1980, Evelyn's body was taken back to her hometown in Chilliwack and she was buried there. After the burial, some of Evelyn's family members blamed John for her death. Others even assumed that he killed her. It was all too much for the heartbroken John to bear, and he sank into depression. The whole tragedy caused a significant change in his character, and to deal with the pain, he began drinking and taking drugs. He also eventually moved permanently to England. "From that moment to today, I've been a different person altogether because it changed the way I look at life," John said. "It changed how I feel about other people because I was very trusting before. Now I'm not," he added. 2 months after the death of Evelyn, in March of 1980, detectives suddenly got a lead in the case. Here is what happened. A woman was sexually assaulted and almost killed in Volusia County. This is an area which is about a 4-hour drive from Miramar. The assailant was soon identified as a 33-year-old man by the name of Ronald Richards. Upon further investigation by the police, it was discovered that Ronald was living in Miramar. Due to this, Volusia County officials reached out to the police in Miramar to assist them in apprehending him. Ronald was eventually arrested and convicted of attempted murder and sexual assault. For the crime, he was sentenced to 50 years in jail. Miramar police, however, couldn't help but notice the similarity between Evelyn's murder and the crime Ronald committed in Volusia County. They began to suspect that he was also Evelyn's killer. It seemed very likely because he lived only 12 houses away from Evelyn and also had a weird habit of jogging at night. A closer look also revealed that he had a dark past. Back in 1975, before the Volusia County case for which he was jailed, he was convicted of manslaughter against his girlfriend. For the crime, he spent 4 years in a prison in Ohio and was released on parole in 1979. When Miramar detectives discovered all these details about Ronald, he was immediately moved to the top of the list of suspects in Evelyn's case. However, they did not have any concrete evidence to prove that he was really Evelyn's killer. And as time went by, the case went cold. The case was reviewed several times over the years, but nothing came out of these reviews. In 2021, Detective Jonathan Zeller decided to submit the DNA evidence that was taken decades ago from Evelyn's body for testing. After several months of waiting, the results of the DNA analysis finally came out, and it was what detectives had suspected all along. The result led them to no one else but Ronald. It was a major breakthrough, and detectives were elated that the case was finally solved. "It's a very good feeling," Detective Zeller said. "It's also a good feeling for everybody that was involved in this case. For the family, in particular, for Evelyn's husband," he added. Detectives did not have to worry about looking for Ronald because he was locked up in a prison in Ohio for a different crime. On November 30th, 2022, he was charged with the murder of Evelyn. "We accomplished a very important thing getting this indictment," Detective Zeller said. "This is the first hurdle, and the next step is a trial or no trial because maybe he dies in prison. I don't worry myself with that," he added. John was also updated about the progress made in his late wife's murder case, and he was grateful for it. At almost 80, he had given up hope that the case would ever be solved. Despite the fact that Evelyn's killer was finally found, the pain her death brought remained with him. "I'm not a vindictive person, but I would certainly want to see justice for Evelyn. I don't believe in this closure thing. One never has closure. You never have closure, as you can tell," John said. "But certainly, justice for Evelyn is the most important thing. At the moment, Ronald remains locked up, but in the future, he will be transferred to Miramar to formally face the murder charge. In addition to this, detectives also believe that he is a serial killer and that he could have had more victims than they know about. The murder of Evelyn remains the oldest solved cold case in Miramar's history. Evelyn's case is no doubt a tragic one, but thanks to the relentless efforts of the authorities, Her family has been able to get much-needed closure. However, the hole her brutal murder left in their hearts will forever remain, since Ronald, who committed the crime, is currently serving a prison sentence. The case of April Jones. April Jones was born on April 4, 2007. The idea for her name came from her birthday. Unfortunately, she was not born as fortunate as other children, as it was revealed that she had cerebral palsy, a condition that affected her mobility. One day, April had been playing outside with a friend for approximately 20 minutes, but she did not return home around 7 p.m. as expected. Her parents had last seen her riding a bicycle. They went out to look for her and found her 7-year-old friend, but April was not with her. The friend explained that April got into a car with a stranger. Her friend was able to describe the man who had abducted April. He was wearing a green jacket and had blue or green eyes, brown hair, and a beard. Significantly, the friend mentioned that April had entered the car on the driver's side. This suggested that the car had a left-hand steering wheel, which is typical in the UK. The police responded promptly, arriving at the scene 8 minutes after the emergency call. They interviewed anyone who might have information about April's disappearance, but the family could not recall any unusual events that day. Earlier, April had attended her swimming class and was allowed to play outside with her friends, which was a typical routine. The news of April's disappearance spread rapidly through the neighborhood, and many locals left their homes to assist in the search. While the community's efforts were well-intentioned, they made the police's job more challenging, as the officers had to go door to door to gather information, but many residents were out searching. By the evening of October 1st, the authorities had released additional details about April's disappearance, including what she was wearing: a school polo shirt and a purple coat. More than 100 people had gathered to support the police in their search efforts. Their expertise can be very useful in locating her. Not only local residents showed up, but also a large number of volunteers from England who crossed the border into Wales to offer their support. Several people from South Wales also traveled up to assist. The search would not be easy, as the area around the town was surrounded by mountains, waterfalls, gorges, dense forests, uneven ground, and thick woodlands for miles. Additionally, it was a chilly, overcast autumn evening and it was raining heavily outside. To ensure the volunteers' safety, the police had to carefully organize their efforts. Several volunteer search teams were now covering an area of about 60 square kilometers around 3:30 in the morning, 8 hours after the first police contact. The volunteers had been diligently navigating the harsh Welsh countryside. Despite conducting searches throughout the night, there was still no trace of April as of October 2nd, 2012. The police in Wales have now issued a child rescue notice, a nationwide alert for police agencies in the UK requesting that they ensure their officers have a description of April and the man who abducted her. This was the first time the entire nation had heard the child rescue alarm. The media was now putting tremendous pressure on the police. 14 hours after April had disappeared to provide every piece of information they had. It also questioned the way the police handled the probe. After taking over the investigation, Detective Superintendent Andy John began providing the public and media with as many updates as he could. He also placed barricades and instructed his officers to stop any approaching vehicles. Posters with an image of April, who was missing, were displayed in the hope that it would jog someone's memory. People living nearby, as well as those residing farther away, had been providing the police with various reports, as is common in investigations of this nature. Numerous locals identified a man who did match April's kidnapper, Mark Bridger. In general, a man from the area named Bridger was a Land Rover driver. His eyes were blue, he had short facial hair, and above all, he drove a left-hand drive car. Several witnesses claimed to have seen Bridger or his car in the vicinity when April vanished. They found Bridger's last known address and repeatedly tried to contact it, but neither he nor April Jones were there. Bridger had no prior history of legal troubles. Given the large number of volunteers involved in the search, it was impossible to verify the claims made by some residents that Bridger had participated in the initial search for April's disappearance at night. With the limited information available to them, and reports from the surrounding community about Bridger's apparent disappearance, the police focused all of their efforts on finding him. Helicopters hovered above the scene, and the police conducted a thorough search of all possible locations for him. They learned that Bridger had just moved into a brand new cottage named Mount Pleasant. Upon their arrival, there were no visible signs of life, and the property was devoid of any automobiles. They went into the cottage and called April's name, but she didn't answer. It was unclear at the moment if Bridger had been hiding from the authorities. Police helicopter had earlier seen him walking his dog near April's home, having apparently tried to disguise himself by shaving his head and beard. Police cornered and questioned him. The policeman questioned, "Where is she?" Bridger just answered, "It was an accident. I crushed her with my car. I don't know where she is." Officers reported that Bridger was very emotional throughout the arrest. The arresting officers read him his rights, which included the following. "You do not have to say anything, but anything you say may be used as evidence." Oddly enough, Bridger was eager to converse, though he was not required to speak. The officers reiterated that he was free to do so. He informed them, "I've been looking for her all day and night on foot. My car is in the garage. It is a left-hand drive Land Rover Discovery. I didn't abduct her. I tried my best to revive her, then panicked. I only knew her name this morning, when I saw the news on the television. I just wish I could remember where I'd put her. There was no life in her. She was just on the seat. I want to say sorry to the family." They took Bridger to the closest police station. In the meantime, back in April's hometown, police units, search teams, volunteers, and mountain rescuers kept searching every square inch of the Welsh countryside for April. Still, despite everyone's best efforts, they were unable to locate her. Along with the emergency services staff who worked just as hard and determinedly, hundreds of volunteers from across the nation stayed out all night, slept for a few hours, and then resumed their search. The police had received over 600 texts from people volunteering their services and proposing locations to search. Because of this, the police had a large number of volunteers to assist them in their search. And because of their local expertise, they were able to check over 20 distinct areas extensively. The people can occasionally obstruct this kind of investigation. Still, local expertise is essential in remote places like this one, and the police needed all the assistance they could get. At this point, detectives had taken Mark Bridger into custody and were questioning him. Unusually for a man of his standing, he spoke without hesitation. On the contrary, he talked candidly about what had transpired. Right away, he said, "I don't know where she is. Yesterday, I came down to see my daughter's teacher. She had a parents' evening and I then parked up opposite my girlfriend's house, which I believe is not far away from April's mother and father's house. Stupid, I'd had a few to drink and there were two girls on their bikes. I remember the dark-headed girl came behind the car. I looked to see where the other girl was, and I couldn't see this other little girl. And the next minute, the bike was there." Bridger acknowledged that he was in the vicinity at the time and acknowledged hitting April with his automobile while intoxicated when she was riding her bike. Mark Bridger insists that he never intended to harm April, even though he acknowledges that he was aware of his error. Instead, he maintains that he took off with her in his car. He needed to bring her to the hospital right away, and that's what he realized. "It's okay, Mark. The color had gone out of her. Okay, her lips were purple. Paul and Call are friends of mine and I've killed their daughter." Effective then, without hesitation, Bridger acknowledges that his actions that evening caused April Jones to die. He even goes so far as to say that her parents were friends. However, Bridger's memory tends to deteriorate following the submission. He has been relatively open about his involvement thus far. Actually, these officers may have never had an easier time getting a confession from some. Bridger can't recall anything about what he did with April's body, though. Following her confession, despite the police's repeated attempts to question him, Bridger's unexpected episode of amnesia persisted. "And I'm in my house, and she's not there. Being upstairs, and I can't find her. I wouldn't have ditched her. I know that I wouldn't have. I'd have put her somewhere." With Mark Bridger, the cops have been quite cautious thus far. He'd been entirely honest with them. They can make him clam up with aggressive interrogation, but now they start to question his sincerity. The police were aware that there was very little likelihood that Bridger's memory would be blank at the critical moment when April's body vanished. The pressure increased as the cops questioned him, even though it is evident that he was lying. He persisted in telling his story and got even more upset. In fact, the cops started to wonder if April was dead at all. Was there anything that Mark Bridger was saying that they could genuinely believe? The police decided to give Bridger a platform to give us account of what happened on Tuesday. The day he was hauled in, however, the police used it as an opportunity to get more information out of him. You tell me that when you get out of your vehicle, you look underneath the vehicle and you see April, yes. Although Bridger insisted that he had run over April, the police received evidence from April's 7-year-old companion that April was okay and had cheerfully gotten into Bridger's car and was grinning. Who would lie like that to a 7-year-old? In actuality, they would not have any cause to, nor would they choose to. We have a witness that was present. This person says that April got into the Land Rover via the driver's door, which on a normal car would be the right-hand side. But that's really the passenger side door on your car. That is a complete fabrication and lies. Can't have happened. Bridger shifted his tone. It was apparent he was unaware that the police had a witness, albeit a 7-year-old one who saw it all. It was clear that the information contradicted his account of events, and he was upset. Regardless of his emotional condition, Bridger remained resilient to the various methods of inquiry, and his version of events held steady. He showed no signs of backing down. The detectives did something. They brought in Dr. Joe Sullivan, one of the world's foremost authorities on criminal body language and conduct. Dr. Sullivan did more than just watch the Bridger interviews. He also went to his house. He wanted to know everything there was to know about this individual in order to create a psychological profile. What he found astounded him. Bridger kept knives, handcuffs, and a shotgun, both hidden and on display at his house. Moreover, he was employed at a slaughterhouse. According to Dr. Sullivan, Bridger was a fantasist who thought of himself as a character akin to Rambo. Stated differently, he was not part of the real world. In defiance of Dr. Sullivan's guidance, the police chose to approach their inquiry in a paternalistic manner. After all, Bridger was a father of 6. Bridger was not going to alter his claim now. Their only chance was with the forensic specialists thoroughly searching Bridger's house. The teams at the house did manage to devise a solution, though. They may have found anyone's blood. They found little specks of it in the restroom. It's possible that Bridger cut himself shaving. It was just that the police were ignorant at this time. After submitting the samples to the laboratory, it can take up to 24 hours to receive the findings. After the police took him in, disregarding his advice, Dr. Sullivan told the officers what he believed Bridger to be. He was unlikely to experience an enormous amount of empathy or have any major sense of guilt about what he had done. Of course, he will inevitably try to present himself as someone who does have those characteristics. But the sense that I had from the information we had gathered even at that time was that this is a man who is not going to respond to an appeal to his better nature. According to Dr. Sullivan, there was little need to attempt to appeal to Bridger's better nature. He didn't have one, and he wasn't going to respond to any police appeals for regret, sympathy, or guilt. Now that the police had taken Dr. Sullivan's advice to heart, Bridger was under increased strain on suspicion of murder. They detained him again right away. It was a shocking shock. Bridger turned completely pale. The police had also found explicit photos of children on his laptop. The reason for his second arrest was that he had offensive pictures of kids. The net was getting closer. Bridger now thought the police had more information than they had disclosed. April's parents were unconcerned, even though Bridger seemed to be losing control of the situation. 3 days after April had disappeared on that fateful Monday night, that the police had given up on locating April alive. It's not an abduction case anymore. It's a murder. Naturally, the police kept this knowledge from Bridger. Still, they also made the decision to advise the numerous volunteers who had put in a lot of effort to locate April that it was time for them to head home and leave the situation to the experts. This suggestion met with stiff resistance as hundreds of exhausted volunteers, many of whom were crying. As they departed the site, they had little to show for their efforts. On Friday, For days after April's disappearance, police search teams were out in full force, scouring the area for any clues. Forensic investigators found no proof that Bridger had killed April. Importantly, there was also no evidence supporting Bridger's account. Inspection of his vehicle, a Land Rover, revealed no marks, blood, hair, or skin, contradicting his claim that April's body should have left scratches or traces inside the car. Bridger tried to clarify by saying he did not witness any blood on April after the alleged collision. The child had apparently been run over, yet showed no visible injuries. But his narrative and the game he had been playing with the police was about to be exposed as a farce. On Friday night at 6:15 p.m., the lab contacted the detectives. They had matched April's toothbrush DNA to blood spatters found in Bridger's bathroom. They also discovered April's DNA on Bridger's fleece collar and jogging bottoms. After gathering sufficient evidence, the police filed charges against Bridger. They had found sexualized photos of minors on his laptop, which he denied viewing for personal satisfaction, despite his internet search history. Bridger had been in custody for 3.5 days by Saturday. As the allotted 96-hour questioning period neared its end, the Crown Prosecution Service had to decide whether to press charges. Just over an hour after the final interview, Bridger remained unfazed upon hearing the charges. There was no remorse or emotion from him. As the prison van arrived, angry bystanders hurled objects and insults at Bridger. Over the next 2 weeks, forensic investigators found increasing blood traces of April at Bridger's house, as well as several broken bones in his fireplace, though it could not be conclusively determined if they were April's due to decomposition. On May 30th, 2013, a jury found 47-year-old Mark Bridger guilty of April Jones' kidnapping and murder. The judge labeled him a chronic liar and pedophile, stating that April was likely not his intended target, but tragically happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Without hesitation, the judge sentenced Bridger to life in prison with no possibility of parole. Bridger maintained his claim that April's death was a horrific accident when his car struck her, but had long lost any credibility. April Jones was a typical young child full of potential whose life was tragically cut short by a single sick individual. Her family, while devastated, expressed relief that Bridger would never be free to harm another child. April's remains were never found in Bridger's house, though 17 bone fragments were recovered, none conclusively linked to her. Her parents pushed for changes to how search engines handle illegal content, leading to new measures by companies like Google and Bing. April's family and friends will always have a void in their hearts that cannot be filled. Wish for them to be able to reconstruct their lives to the best of their abilities. On April 26, 2013, April's funeral service was held in her hometown. May April Jones rest in peace. Born to her parents Doyle Matthews and Vanetta Matthews, on April 27, 1956, Mary Robin Matthews doted on her family. Her childhood was spent with her 2 sisters, Danetta and Monica, in a religious home in Kingman, Kansas. Robin, who preferred to be called by her middle name, was known as a vivacious and carefree girl who was beautiful inside and out. Not only was she very friendly, but she also enjoyed the company of people. At a very young age, she met her future husband Douglas Walter, who also grew up in Kingman. In 1974, the couple got married, and Robin officially became Mary Robin Walter. Shortly after the marriage, the couple conceived their only daughter, Pamela. With dreams of being successful, Robin and Doug moved to Great Bend, Kansas, 2 years later. They settled in a mobile home in the rural area of Great Bend. Initially, Doug had planned to pursue a career in insurance, but eventually gave up that profession and instead went to work at his uncle's service station. Meanwhile, Robin enrolled herself in college to pursue nursing due to her fondness for helping people. Along with her studies, she also took up a job at the Great Bend Manor Hospital. For 4 years after moving to Great Bend, Robin was enjoying life at ease. On one side, Robin was raising her daughter alongside her husband Doug, who was exceptionally supportive. Then on the other side, she was really excelling in both her studies and work. However, she had no idea that her life was going to hit an abrupt stop very soon. January 24th, 1980 was a regular winter morning for the Walter family when Doug headed off to work. The first red flag came that same morning when Robin missed her afternoon nursing class, which was extremely unusual for her. The situation got weirder when Robin did not pick up their daughter. Then 5-year-old Pamela from the babysitter's house at 3 p.m. like she was supposed to. Unaware of these events, Robin's husband Doug went to a private club to hang out with 2 of his friends after finishing his work hours. It was 6:40 p.m. in the evening when Doug returned to their mobile home in Nelson Trailer Park, located near the Great Bend Municipal Airport, with a friend. Inside the home, the men discovered a grisly scene, as 23-year-old Robin's lifeless body was discovered in a pool of blood in her own bed, lying face up. In a state of shock and with a broken heart, Doug reported the incident to the local police station. Deputies from the Banton County Sheriff's Office sent the corpse to the coroner's office for an autopsy. While they began scanning the house for clues, they found the murder weapon, which was a .22 caliber pistol, which originally belonged to the Walters. Autopsy reports revealed that Robin had been shot 12 times in her neck, chest, abdomen, and arm. It was concluded that the gun was loaded and emptied twice during the shooting. When Doug was questioned by police regarding his assumptions about the person responsible for his wife's death, he could not come up with an answer. He was unable to think of someone who could be so cruel to Robin, who was loved by everybody. He also let the investigators know that due to their living in a safe neighborhood, they never locked their doors and always left the keys in the car. They could have never anticipated the evil that was lurking around the corner. The investigators were also baffled by the apparent lack of motive for the murder, as there was no evidence of sexual assault or robbery in the home. After a thorough investigation, detectives zeroed in on a person of interest but could not make an arrest due to the lack of evidence. But they did not publicly name the suspect at the time. Therefore, the case went cold, and remained so for over 40 years while Robin's family mourned her loss. For decades later, in April 2022, while recovering from COVID, Detective Sergeant Adam Hales from the Barton County Sheriff's Office reopened the Gold case. After taking a fresh look at the case, Detective Hales discovered some incriminating information, some of which had been overlooked in the original investigation and some of which was added at a later date. As additional investigators joined Detective Hales on the case, the team started interviewing multiple witnesses across the country who were involved in the original investigation. The Kansas Bureau of Investigation also joined to assist in the investigation. In October 2022, after building a case based on the newfound evidence, detectives submitted the case to the attorney of Martin County Courthouse for review. After approximately 4 weeks of review, an arrest warrant was obtained for the murder in a second-degree charge on the suspect, who was finally identified as Robert Hanks. Hanks was a neighbor of the Walter family at the time of Robin's murder. It was still not clear why Hanks became a person of interest in the first place, but he definitely had a long criminal history. Just a year after the murder, Hanks was arrested and charged with rape, aggravated battery, aggravated robbery, and aggravated burglary. He was convicted in 1983 and served about 10 years before being paroled in 1993. Detectives concluded that Hank, who was 25 at the time of Robin's slaying, broke into the Walter home and gunned down Robin on the fateful evening of 1980. On December 8, 2022, Barton police arrested now 68-year-old Robert Hanks from Oxford, Kansas. This arrest is the oldest homicide arrest in Kansas history. Hanks is being held in the Barton County Jail in lieu of a $500,000 bond. Sadly, many of Robin's family members could not see this day. Robin's mother passed away in 2012 and her father soon followed in 2015, while Doug passed away just a year earlier in 2021. Robin Walter's daughter, Pamela Walter Cooper, told the media that the family had always suspected Hanks of her mother's murder, even though he was not convicted of it until this year. She further expressed that she is curious to know if he is remorseful for his actions. However, even if that is not the case, she personally had forgiven him a long time ago. We want to look at the chilling case of Gary Lee Haney, a case that had previously seemed to be lost in time. In the late 1970s, a terrifying discovery occurred on the outskirts of Spencer Island, in the middle of the rapidly expanding suburban environment of Marysville, Washington. This peaceful location, well known for its stunning variety of shorebirds and ducks, ended up serving as the unexpected location for a terrifying occurrence that would forever haunt the neighborhood of Marysville. As the natives gathered on the Spencer Island in search of consolation in the peace that bird viewing offers, an unwary duck hunter approached the island's shore, unknowing of the tragedy that waited for him. It happened on January 3, 1979. In the early morning, the previous week's temperature had been below freezing, and by January 3rd, the air finally felt a little bit warmer. A few residents of Marysville decided to have some serene moments at Spencer Island. Among these residents was a desperate duck hunter who entered the barren abyss in search of a catch, despite the icy winter of 1979. At that point, he had no idea that fate had another surprise in store for him. He came out of the depths and witnessed something that was nearly surreal. A horrifying image appeared before his eyes. The mysterious island's bleak tidal flats were plagued by a ghostly skeleton that looked like a Halloween decoration and was tragically caught in a web of fishing line. The Snohomish River Delta, a shoe, a leg bone, and a pair of tan pants were found together in an odd grouping by a 12-foot wooden piling. The hunter's focus was then caught by a red checkered shirt next to a downsitter. Soon after, he made the startling discovery of a skull, ribs, and another black leather shoe with a foot inside. The scene was nothing less than a terrifying riddle that needed to be solved. The hunter called the police right away to report what his eyes had witnessed. When officers arrived, the red, orange, gray, and white checkered clothing was identified by detectives working on the case. A human skull and a shoe with a foot still inside were lying 5 feet apart. While keeping in mind all these horrifying facts, detectives also discovered a belt in a size 33 or 34 and a pair of lace-up shoes in a size 8. The rubber heels of the shoes were imprinted with the O'Sullivan logo. The khaki pants tag stated that they were made in the USA. These discoveries provided crucial information for the man's identity. His leather wallet was also discovered. Although it was empty of cash and identification, the victim seemed to have passed away many months prior. From the point of discovery onward, the victim was identified by the sheriff's office as John Doe 79-1. Due to the skeletal remains decomposition, it was impossible to ascertain the cause of death. At the time, there were no dental records that could be matched to the body. The body was buried in Cypress Lawn Cemetery a few months later, on March 15, 1979, by the Cassidy Funeral Home. Because there wasn't much technology available at the time, unexplained bodies were frequently buried. In the past, DNA technology wasn't as developed. Therefore, human remains weren't stored in the medical examiner's office until they were identified or claimed. Since nobody in the neighborhood was reported missing, there was no chance of identifying this body. The need to identify the body became less urgent as the years went by. The investigation quickly went cold and was forgotten. In 2008, a team of detectives started revisiting unresolved or unexplained crimes in Snohomish County. Many of these cases were solved thanks to developments in DNA technologies. In an effort to locate and identify 1979 John Doe through DNA samples, the team sought to exhume the deceased. However, the examination itself and the considerable documentation required to secure permissions for the excavation can make the entire procedure take years. John Doe was unaware and unaffected by all that was happening above his grave. 7 years later, in 2015, the remains were finally excavated from Cypress Lawn under the supervision of the Snohomish County Sheriff's Office team and the medical examiner's office. This came about after many years and a lot of paperwork. After the body was moved to the medical examiner's office, he was then identified as Spencer Island Doe that same year in 2015 in an effort to identify Spencer Island Doe by his teeth. Forensic dentist Dr. Kyle Tanaka had collected his dental radiographs, charted his teeth, and uploaded the information to the National Crime Information Center. The National Crime Information Center is the FBI's computerized index that covers both criminal cases and instances involving missing persons. It enables law enforcement officials in other parts of the country who lack jurisdiction to find a mat for their victim or prospective suspects. This effort, however, was in vain. The teeth of this unidentified body were just unmatchable. Natalie Morey, a very accomplished forensic artist, was given the case in April 2016, and within a month, had successfully taken measurements, taken photos, and rebuilt the face of Spencer Island Doe using sketches and drawings. She based her reconstruction on facial morphology to provide a sense of how the victim must have appeared in real life by securing rubber pegs to the skull in all the gaps. Natalie rebuilt the face. She then imagined what he may have looked like. His flat cheeks and small nose appeared typical of people with Asian ancestry. In order to imagine him at the moment of his disappearance, she sketched him from the shoulders up wearing the same red checkered shirt. The basic plan was to have someone recognize the face from the sketch, while Natalie worked on the sketches. The skeletal remains of Spencer Island Doe were examined by Dr. Kathy Taylor, a forensic anthropologist from Washington State, at the King County Medical Office. She determined that they may have belonged to a Caucasian adult male between the ages of 21 and 61, who stood between 5 feet 2 inches and 5 feet 6 inches tall. The bones were not broken, but the leg's fractured femur had a pohealing outcome. In actuality, the largest bone in the human body is the femur. The man would have had continuous discomfort for some years, because an X-ray showed that the central part of his torso was protruding like the claw of an ice scraper. Detectives made the observation that they had never witnessed a fracture heal in such a manner, which prompted them to make the assumption that the individual may have chosen not to seek medical attention at all or had lived in a third-world nation with no access to medical care. Since there were no definitive solutions, Jane Jorgensen, an investigator at the medical examiner's office, was perplexed by the circumstance. It is improbable that the man would not have sought prompt medical attention, which is offered for free in many nations, even if he was homeless at the time of his death. It raises the question of why this man endured such agonizing anguish while remaining in silence. The individual also had 2 missing front teeth on his left side and 2 missing molars, both of which appeared to have been lost before he passed away, because the sockets had fully healed. Investigators were perplexed as to why the man had not received immediate assistance for his leg after discovering that he had a gap in one of his teeth and 3 teeth with alloy fillings, which suggested that the man had sought medical care at some point in the past. Regarding the circumstances surrounding the man's existence and eventual passing, the detectives felt confused and puzzled. Had he endured torturous treatment, officers noted that he might have been a prisoner as well because prisoners have access to dental care. But even if he had a limp and hypothetically had missing teeth, why wouldn't anyone recall this man? Due to the fracture, this person might have been 2 inches shorter on one side and would have had to walk with a limp. Did anyone not remember seeing a man limping around town? After much publicity, a former police officer from the 1970s reported to the police that he remembered seeing a man walk with a limp in the town in the late 1970s, but he couldn't remember his name. This provided access to medical records, but there was a significant age of ambiguity. He might have been a fisherman, and he might have either perished or been buried at sea by his companions. In September 2018, the University of North Texas Health Sciences Center received a portion of the victim's femur. It was then subjected to additional DNA extraction testing and uploaded to CODIS, a database used by the FBI to identify samples based on forensic genealogy. The institution was able to obtain mitochondrial DNA and SDR pictures in March of the following year. But because there were no matches, the results were inconclusive. The officers persisted nonetheless. They simply had to come up with alternative ways of identifying Spencer Island Doe. By 2018 and 2021, using a combination of circumstances, including short tandem repeat testing and dental records, the Snohomish County Medical Examiner's Office investigators ruled out a number of missing people as probable matches. They did, however, begin a collaboration with Offermink in 2021 to develop a sophisticated DNA profile that may be utilized for investigative genetic genealogy to solve their and resolve cold cases. Through this collaboration, a number of unsolved cases have been successfully identified and solved. By January 2021, Offermink had received a portion of the femur for DNA extraction. DNAsolves.com provided funding for the entire endeavor, in the anticipation that the technology will one day lead to the identification of the Spencer Island John Doe. In other words, it made it much simpler to narrow down probable descendants when the search was reduced from 1,000 persons to 100. A DNA profile was successfully created in May 2021, and the collected DNA was sufficient for forensic-grade genome sequencing. Spencer Island doe's race was finally verified as being Caucasian. Anyone trying to trace their own family history or locate long-lost relatives follows this same procedure. Investigating police constructed family trees from numerous stop matches and discovered a male who had gone missing in Everett, Washington in the late 1970s. Finally, the Spencer Island John Doe was identified. He went by the name Gary Lee Haney. The 29-year-old had vanished in the late 1970s, but either no one reported him missing or the records were mismanaged. In any case, the skeletal remains now had a name thanks to the DNA match with his half-sister. The chief medical examiner formally identified the descendant as Gary Lee Haney on February 10, 2023. The cold case was ultimately solved after 44 years. On September 23, 1950, Bernice Schaefer, Gary Lehaney's mother, gave birth to him. When Gary was still a little child, Bernice divorced his father and remarried in 1955 to an Air Force officer by the name of Sheldon Lehaney. Gary was adopted by his stepfather, who also legally altered his middle name. This young man and his parents were able to explore the globe. Gary was a fan of the Beatles and reportedly had excellent hand-eye coordination when playing the piano. Famed Gary's 71-year-old cousin assisted in putting together a variety of recollections and details regarding Gary's life. He maintained records for the large, dispersed family. A couple black and white pictures showed the dark-haired Gary clutching a large dog's leash. His mother is with him and wearing a stylish outfit, and his stepfather is dressed well. The images depict the boy's life, including a photo from his school. The family relocated to New York from Kansas. The Haneys were always away when the family would gather for a celebration every year. Thane has a faint recollection of Gary behaving slightly differently because of some sort of mental condition. The youngster actively hallucinated as an adult, which may have been caused by schizophrenia, but it also could have been autism. Gary's biological father, Joseph Candamati, passed away at the Missouri Veterans Hospital when Gary was 16 years old. 3 years later, his mother passed away. Gary Haney never got to meet his half-siblings neither. His stepfather likewise completed his military service and began working as a commercial pilot for Boeing when Gary's real parents passed away. From the early 1970s through at least 1990, Sheldon Lee Haney resided in the Everett, Washington area. Gary may have lived with his stepfather since he was the only living relative he had. Sheldon Haney occasionally had a wandering lifestyle after retiring. He liked traveling by road to Bayo, California in Mexico during the winter, although it's obvious that he had little responsibility. Perhaps the weather was too cold for the man. Is it possible Gary was an independent? Thane then recalled that his uncle had visited him in Texas somewhere in the middle of the 1980s. His nephew, Gary, was never brought up or addressed by him. According to certain documents, Gary was residing in a boarding home, and according to Social Security, he passed away on Christmas Eve in 1976. However, given that no living relatives listed him as dead, disputed this fact. Investigators suggested that Sheldon and Gary may have quarreled or that he may have moved out on his own. In any event, Sheldon Haney couldn't locate his grown-up stepson. However, it should be emphasized that the paper record-keeping back then was not as comprehensive as it is now. Recent investigators who looked into the matter did not discover a missing person report. As a result, it's likely that the documents were misplaced before being converted to digital format. Sheldon Haney passed away in 1997 without knowing where his stepson was. Despite careful examination, after so many years, there was still no conclusive proof of foul play. Their research led detectives to the conclusion that Gary might have been carried away by the river current and eventually ended up where he was discovered, or he might have drowned close to where he was discovered, with suspected explanations ranging from drowning to a head injury, or a medical issue. The precise cause of death is still shrouded in mystery. Thane has no idea what his cousin looked like as an adult other than the pictures from their childhood. He planned to erect a monument or gravestone where Gary was discovered. It seems that after 44 years of detours and turns, the answers to this case have only raised new queries. What specific details surround Gary's passing? There was no known cause of death and no hint. The Spencer Island Doe at least have a name and some sort of resolution. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the depths of unsolved mysteries. Cold cases not only challenge our understanding of the past, but also ignite our curiosity and determination for answers. Remember to subscribe to stay updated on our latest investigations. And if you have any information regarding the cases we've covered, don't hesitate to reach out. Together, we can shed light on the shadows of the past and bring closure to those who seek it. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay curious, and never stop seeking the truth.